Welcome everyone. JD Centre of Art is delighted to collaborate with the India International Centre for Meet the Artist program. JDC is envisioned as a unique art centre that aims to preserve and exhibit its large collection of folk, tribal, traditional, contemporary art all under one roof. It is currently under construction in Bhubaneswar, Orissa. Meet the Artist is an in-house program of JDCA where invited artists, craftspersons, or scholars
This evening, we are meeting to talk about Haku Shah. And recently, Jaslin Dhamija passed away. And many of our very close in the field of art and culture disappeared. And it's very sad. And there's a vacuum in the art scene. Everybody involved in politics and money and position. Nobody's concerned about art and culture in general. And there was a time where the entire country, this country is unique in the world, where the folk, tribal, classical, and contemporary is all alive, all the rivers are flowing. So, although I'm a contemporary artist, I'm originally from Orissa, hence I've set up the JD Centre of Art because I had a collection of arts, craft, and antiquity for over 60 years, which I've donated to the center. Reminiscing Jaslin, who was a dear friend, so was Haku. And before, we had a program with Jaslin Dhamija before, and the very last program was by Ashok Chatterjee. Ashok Chatterjee was the director of National Institute of Design and also a great cultural and craft activist. He was also in the Craft Council. He's also in the Craft Council. Haku, my dear friend, was a Gandhian. He didn't follow Gandhiism, but he was a pure, committed person from Gujarat. And his son, Vedchhi Shah, who's a designer who lives in Delhi now, and is going to talk about Haku. And many of these artists, like K.G. Subramaniam, who's known as Mani, many of these artists worked in Weaver Service Center, in the Handicraft Design Center, etc. Upul Jaikar and many others, created space for artists so they can have a retainership and they can have the bread and butter by working and they can continue their thing, their own creative activity. So Haku, I remember meeting him in hundreds of occasions in Delhi, Bombay, Ahmedabad, and many places. Now, we have had, the JD Centre of Art, which was built in 1997, established. And the building is ready, designed by B.V. Doshi, who also passed away recently last month, was a dear friend and the planner and the designer of the center. And so one portion of the building is ready. Siddharth, my son, who is from NID, is looking after the center at the moment. We have eminent people in the trust. We used to hold a National Documentary Film Festival on art. We have had the 13th, and it has stopped because of the COVID. And we're doing this online program, the Meet the Artist program, which has gone on for more than 20 years. And I think it's one of the few institutions in the country which has gone on uninterrupted for this. And it's a very humble program. But because of the online, it's also now collaborated with India International Center in Delhi. And people not only in India and the rest of the world can participate. Earlier, we used to have the Meet the Artist program at Bhubaneswar at the JD Centre of Art. So Parthiv is here, and this is what JDCA is about. And Parthiv will please speak about Haku. And please begin. Parthiv is a designer, but also his son. So you will have two angles to speak about. Thank you, Parthiv, being here.
Thank you, Jatin Bhai. And I'm very happy to be on this panel, on this platform at JDCA. And Jatin Bhai and Siddharth invited me to be part of this. And I told them that let's do it in March because my father was born in March and he also passed away in March. So it's sort of some kind of, tribute to him in that sense, from a son, from, personal angle in that sense. So more or less this particular talk or presentation, if I may say, will be going to be next 50 minutes. I'm going to take you on a journey from a more or less my perspective, and also try and not bring in how would I say, I'm not going to sort of intellectualize his journey, but I'm going to just how he started and what happened in his life. And there were three aspects, kind of the art practice or creative practice, I would say, what he parallelly, in tandem, it was going on in his life. And that was, of course, fine arts and design, because he was associated with NID for initial years when NID was being set up. And then he got into the research of, folk and tribal art and ethnography. So in somewhat like what Jatin Bhai is himself had collected many things, and he was interested in folk and tribal art. My father also in the process of researching collected a lot of stuff. So you will see that also. So I'm going to start my presentation, and we'll take it from there. So basically, I would like to also, a lot of people know me, but oh, what happened? Sorry. It's not moving for some reason. So he was born in 1934, and he was an artist, cultural anthropologist, teacher, Gandhian, and author of international repute on folk and tribal art. That's what his practices were. This is what there were two or three people, actually three people, which were big influence in his life. And one was Popul Jaikar, who was, who established many institutes in India in early 50s and 60s. And of course, was close to Mrs. Gandhi, and also she knew Nehru. So this is what she had to say about him. This is my family. I mean, my brother who lives in New York, Setu, who's an architect. My mother, Vilu, who's a housewife, but she always was a companion in my father's work. And she was always helping with all the, because he was interested in folk and tribal. And she was from a farmer kind of landlord family. So she knew all those aspects, and she would, whether it's some songs of tribal or a folk, or it was about alpana, or is it about, food, or is it about some textile, and she would have a lot of contribution to make. So she was very much part of it. About myself, of course, Jatin Bhai said that I'm a designer. So I studied in NID, and I specialized in visual communication, which also is interesting because there the NID one was under one roof, where your textile design, ceramic design, product design, graphic design, all was coming together. And my father's practice also had similar approach. That is because, like I said, one was Pupul Jaikar, second was Charles Eames, that was his dear friend, and the third person who he respected was Stella Kramrisch, who gave him first curatorial job to do Unknown India, which I'll go and talk about a little more. And the fourth person, of course, was KG Subramaniam, who Jatin Bhai mentioned, Mani sir from Baroda, who was his guru, but then he became friend. So this presentation is going to be, from my angle, and this is me, by the way. This was photo was taken by Armin Hoffman, a very famous personality, in 1965, and my father was spinning. And his way of teaching also, like my father taught a lot, even first in Gandhian ashram near Valod, near his village in Vedchhi. And then also he taught in NID, he taught also at School of Architecture, he was at UC Davis. So he was teaching all the time. And by showing, how do you teach? It's not just by mugging up some books. So this is, I think, his way of teaching me. So this is a small village called Valod. Many Gandhians came out from there, and many institutions were established by different people. We won't go into that right now. And so this is the one of the streets, and the blue doors and window you see is my grandparents' house. This is the Vedchhi Ashram, where initially he was there, and they had Gandhian way of living, studying, and practicing all the different philosophy of Gandhiism. And he would go often. It's not that he left in 50s or something like that. He was in touch with them almost every year. He would go there, sometimes do workshop there, sometimes teach there, sometimes do create exhibitions there. So he was very much, though he would be in Ahmedabad mostly, or in Delhi or Bombay, or even later on to abroad. This was the place where he came from, which was a very tribal area. And he loved jhula, he loved swing, which you can find in most houses in Gujarat. So this is MS University. He was there in 1955. And he, after his BA, he didn't have enough money, so he had to come back, and he taught again in Vedchhi for a year or two. I don't remember exactly. And then he went back for masters when he got some kind of scholarship and fellow. He was a fellow there, and this is a old part of the MS University Fine Arts department. It's a old British building, which Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad had built. And so I was talking about KG Subramanian, and he would also come to our house and spend, days and hours. In fact, my parents would be not there. My father would have gone to his, museum. He would sit there and make some nice plastic toy, plasticine toys, and just sit and smoke. The only person I was allowed to buy a cigarette for was for KG Subramanian. So I would run and get cigarettes. That's the only time I could do that. So this is what KG had to say about him. I'm not going to read it, but you can just read it. And they had many dialogues between them, on paper, on phone, and of course he would, whenever KG was in Ahmedabad, he would be at home. So from beginning he was started creating this installations, or whatever you want to call them, structures, decorating the places for, like if you see the Rajendra Prasad is the below the photograph, and behind you see some of the images. It has a kind of Nandlal Bose, effect or influence, whatever you want to call it. So this was for some kind of conference where in Borakhadi, which is also South Gujarat. This is 1955. So he must have started fine arts education, and then he did this. These were some more other. The gate was created, which was like an elephant from the grass and from bamboos and things like that. This was a kind of ambience design for International Conference on War and Peace, which was called Resistance and Reconstruction, again at Gandhi Vidyapeeth in South Gujarat. Mostly used the local material. These were some exhibition structures, or kind of a, how would I say, tents were created. And please keep in mind, this is 1950s to 55, 60. So there were of course no computers, but there's nothing much available. So you had to mostly do all these things with hands. Also, when Vinoba Bhave came to South Gujarat, this is in Songad area, he walked for some 40 kilometers or something like that, or 50 kilometers, I don't remember. So entire route was decorated with these kind of small structures, created from the winnowing fans, or tumbadis, or musical instruments and things like that. And again, like in 56, Weaver Service Center was started, and most painters, like Jatin Bhai said, from Manu Parekh to KG Subramaniam himself, to Arpita Singh, just name it. A lot of people worked because they couldn't, by just making paintings, they couldn't have survived. There were not enough buyers where you can, have your family, you can take care of your family. So this main office was in Bombay, and then there were 3 other centers in Delhi, Kolkata, and Chennai. So this is one of the catalog where you can see some of the people. Mansaram was there, and various people. Amrit Patel is there. And so this is one of the sari which he created when he was there with the weavers. And he worked across India. It's not that though he was based in Bombay, he would go to Orissa, he would go to West Bengal, he would go to Bihar. In fact, in 56 or something, he first time went and he brought the Mithila paintings, because he actually had gone to meet weavers, but he saw a lot of people doing paintings on the wall, and he got very interested, and he didn't have anything. So he went to a next nearby town, and he brought some brown paper, and he made them, asked them to sketch on that, which he brought it back and he showed it to Popul Jaikar, and then later on there was Mr. Kulkarni, who was sent to Bihar to work on this. So I mean, this was not this thing has not been recorded, but this was the how it all happened. So sorry, you wanted to say something?
Bhaskar Kulkarni.
Right, Bhaskar Kulkarni.
He's a friend of mine.
Right.
And he lived in Nizamuddin when we came from Bombay.
Right.
And he did a lot. He's the person worked under Pupul Ben and brought Madhubani painting to India.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So first, my father had gone for something totally different. He brought these sketches, and then, but he was then called by Pupul Ben to NID, because I'm sure some of the NID students are here. I mean, now they are no more students; they are designers. They know about India Report, which Charles Eames wrote, and he talked about that if we want to start a new institute which is going to take place in India about Indian needs, one need to talk, at least learn about Indian design first. You can't just borrow something from America or Europe and start sort of aping them. So there was one area which NID had to concentrate was to research and document Indian designs. And that's why my father, when he was invited in 61 and he joined in 1962, there were only 5-6 people, like Gira Sarabhai and Gautam Bhai was of course there, but Kumar Vyas and Dashrath Patel and Vikram Dalal and Sharad Shah and my father. These were the only few people, and the NID was at Sanskar Kendra, which was across right now the campus is. And his designation was researcher. He was not even a designer or an artist or anything. So he came there as a researcher. And this is one of the photograph of during the designing of Nehru exhibition. And Deborah Sussman is on left, who was chief designer of Charles and Ream's studio. And Veera Ben is in middle, and my father was in the right. So, because there's Ashok Chatterjee we discussed, here it is a quote from him, that it is difficult to think of any aspects of quality in India's craft environment today which does not reflect either Haku Shah's contribution as an activist or as a thinker, who has articulated over many years the opportunities, threats, and challenges of taking ancient traditions into a new time. So this is, of course, NID campus in Paldi. And there is an interesting story about these horses also, that in 1963, he was sent to Tamil Nadu. He went to Tamil Nadu in a place called Erode, somewhere near Erode. And he got two, how would I say, container full of these horses. He was there throughout for 2 months or something like that, or 3 months. And these horses were made and elephants were made. These are called INR horses. And one of them, one container went to, I think, Canada, Montreal, and the one came to Ahmedabad. And some of them are still around. So these are like 60 years old. And you see this chest here from Gujarat or various other things. And in NID only he met Dr. Eberhard Fischer. So for next many years, then he worked with Fischer on various projects or research subjects. So this was the first. In fact, this is the first publication of NID, of a big one. This was, I think, published in 72 or 73. I don't remember the date right now. But it was completely composed, and blocks were made of photographs. And of course, it's a black and white publication. But this is just about one village in western part of Gujarat, in Saurashtra area called Ratadi. And it is like 200, 300 page book. It's about just one small village and their craftspeople there. So the introduction by Alfred Buehler, which says that if one village of India is so rich about their craft, India would be. So in 67, Stella Kramrisch, who was also, I think, introduced to me by to my father by either Pupul Jekar or Kapila Vatsan, I'm not very sure who, but she wanted him to collect objects and curate this exhibition. This is the first time outside India folk and tribal art objects gone, because before that Britishers were always or even earlier the Germans or whoever, they were more interested in Chola bronzes and Ajanta and Ellora, and I mean, it's classical art mainly. So here was the first large exhibition. There might have been few objects gone here and there, but large exhibition which took place in Philadelphia Museum of Art, which was called Unknown India. And so he was there with the exhibition for 1 year. He collected, of course, before that, and he left an ID. Though Giraben was not very happy because she wanted him to be around, but my father found this was an interesting project, so he left an ID and he went to US, and this exhibition then traveled to St. Louis and San Francisco. So Kapila Vatsan has to say this thing about him. Many years ago, it was Stella Kramrisch who identified him as a collaborator for the great exhibition entitled Art of Unknown India. Hakubai had been selecting material for the exhibition. He worked feverishly and passionately. His eye was discerning, his taste impeccable, and his respect for the creators of the art exemplary. I watched him both as artist and collector and knew that despite the challenges and temptation of professional curatorship, here was a man committed first and foremost to the earth and soil of these creations, the human dignity of the creators, and the eloquence of the forms they developed as objects, functional and symbolic. So that's him with Kapilaji. This photograph was in my wedding, actually. And this was Ivan Turner. He was a director of Philadelphia Museum that time. And behind you see, he also did his painting exhibition in Philadelphia because he was there for many months. So he just asked for some canvases and then he painted there while exhibition was being set up, and they were waiting for the containers to come there and things like that. So these are old photographs, which so it's not very good quality, but these were part of that Unknown India exhibition in 68. And so this is just before that, but then we had this continuous. This is Charles Henry Eames at our house, and on the left you see is my grandmother, my father's mother, and me there, right. My brother is in my father's lap. This was our house in Ahmedabad. This was little later, again Eames coming to our home, and he asked me, he says, "Where is your kite?" I said, "It's an attic." He says, "Go climb and bring a kite, I want to fly it." And so we flew the kite, and there were a lot of people waiting, but he wanted to fly kites. So he was associated with very varied kind of people. He didn't, I mean, a lot of artists I don't want to say he was different. That's what I just want to make a point here, that he had people who were interested in museums, people who were interested in design, people who were interested in art, of course, people who were interested in film. So this is Dinkar Kelkar, whose famous museum is there in Pune. If you go, it's worth seeing this museum. Or this is, of course, with Tayyab Mehta. This is with Swami, because Swami was another, Swaminathan was another artist, I would say, who was interested in folk and tribal art. At one time in 70s and 80s, there was a whole, I'm not going to comment much about it, as I promised, but the people considered folk and tribal art was very low. It's not something which was important. The modern art was something which was important, just like there's a high art and low art kind of thing. But Swami was also interested in folk and tribal art, and that's why the Bharat Bhavan came out. Here again, the B.V. Doshi, Mrinalini Ben, Sarabhai, and there's a Pranlal Patel and Jagan Mehta. Both were very well-known photographer. I mean, they have amazing kind of work of photography, and not too many people know about it in India. I mean, that's very sad. These both photographer has images which are even photographers don't know about it. Forget about other artists knowing about it. Like Jagan Mehta traveled with Gandhi in Noakhali, and he's probably the only guy who has his photographs. Of course, both of them are no more now. I mean, all of them are no more, whoever are there in this photograph right now. There's a very well-known artist called Leno Tenney from New York, who was visiting Ahmedabad. There's a George Nakashima, very famous furniture designer. He loved my father, and so they had a lot of give and take, and he would go to his house he lived in US, though he was from Japan. This was an NID. This is Issey Miyake, who was a very well-known fashion designer. And on the right, you see Yoshiko Wada, who's a textile designer and a scholar. This is Sori Yanagi. His father was very famous folk arts expert in Japan. He was like a father of folk art, we would say. Soetsu Yanagi is his son, and a product designer, by the way. And this is Nakashima Studio in US. These were Philip and Phyllis Morrison, who was a astrophysicist. So, like what I'm saying is that he enjoyed meeting and talking to all kinds of people. He was an astrophysicist who was friend of Vikram Sarabhai. So he would come to Ahmedabad often. And he also knew Charles and Ray Eames. They introduced my father. Eames introduced my father to them, and they would come to PRL, which was Physical Research Laboratory, and ISRO in Ahmedabad. This is Bhupen Khakkar, was from Baroda. This is one of the gallerists in Calcutta called Himmani Khanna, because my father was initially from Baroda. He went to Calcutta first, and he used to work there for a while. And then he came to Weaver Service Center in Bombay. This is MS Satyu. He was once filming in Gujarat, and my father took him around. So he worked with many, like Shyam Benegal did a very interesting series called Bharat Ek Khoj, which was based on the discovery of India. And he helped him out in Bharat Ek Khoj about the whole thing about potters, tribals, folk artists. This is a Peter Stam. Kohei Sugiura was another graphic designer from Japan. This is Ray and Lucia Eames, Charles Eames' daughter and wife. And the person who you see in the middle, very dignified looking Gandhian cap person, is actually a driver from NID. His name was Maharaj. This was an exhibition my father and Manjeet Bawa curated on contemporary Indian art and folk art were put together, because in Australia you see this Aboriginal art was as respected, unlike in India. Now it is coming up, but so this was in 80s. They did this exhibition called India Songs. So here Manjeet is also there, and my father there, and the officers from there and the curators. There's a Marty Chen, who was with the Ford Foundation here. Again, Tayyab and Bal Chabra in Bombay. This was in Bombay. This is Viman Sundaram. This is in British Council. This was, he used to conduct a lot of workshops. So this was Rhode Island School of Design. There's this lady called Jane Baker, graphic designer. So he had conducted workshop there. This was in fact part of Festival of India in Japan. Swami, my father, and Jyotindra had curated this exhibition called Art of Adivasis. And so this was in Tokyo, and Jyotindra Jain is here with Popul Jaikar and my father. This is Rajmohan Gandhi, grandson of Gandhiji. It was at Asia Plateau in Panchagini. So, like I said, my father also believed that he would take many workshops. He would go and work with students, young students also, and do workshops with tribal children, with various kinds of people, teachers, because he thought that art should not only be for walls, which would adorn some big farmhouse or fancy, apartment in Cuff Parade or whatever. I mean, he didn't mind that, but he felt that the art should percolate down to the society. This was Satish Gujral. So I'm going to now show some his work. I just wanted to establish that the kind of, practices he did, I mean, before even, so this is going on parallel. Unfortunately, in the PowerPoint, I can't have parallel thing running. I wish there was an exhibition, because then it can, I can show different ways. So he would work with, like today, I was talking to my brother who is in New York and Setu, and he said, it was interesting that not many people know that my father only painted with knife. He rarely used brush. So all his paintings are done with knife. And he always used straight away tubes on the canvas. He never had a palette, in his hand so there was no mixing of a palette, the color in the palette. It's straight away on the canvas. So he would mix his paint also on the canvas. And he will use charcoal sometimes, burnt charcoal, to make a drawing. You see in the behind, in background, it's a glass painting by K.G. Subramanian. And he would just can sit on a floor, sit on a, stand on near a window, and he would paint anywhere. It's not that he had a particular studio and he will have to have, color paint kept somewhere and table kept somewhere and 3 assistants around, or nothing like that. He was just straight away, he would do alone. There was never any assistant. Maximum, sometimes if there was something, like early time, my father said that when we were kind of hardly any money, they couldn't even afford to buy a canvas. So they would buy some cloth and they would create, they used to call it gesso. I mean, Jatin Bhai might know how to prepare this gesso, where, on a cloth, you sort of apply this white chalk kind of thing with a, gum, and create a canvas-like feeling. So he would say so that time my mother would help him out to create that canvas. Many people here would know Adrian Frutiger is a very famous typographer called Frutiger. Frutiger type, if you Google, that's it, designed by him. So he says the impact of modern civilization would have very quickly quenched these last flickering flames of a spontaneous popular art. That is why I think that the work of Haku Shah as ethnologue and as artist is very precious and of lasting value. So here I'm going to it's a sliver of his work. I'm going to present. These are some of very early work. Not many people might have seen this work. Some of them are studies, maybe also from his MS University time. So he would draw with just pen and ink, and sometimes he would also do, like, this is he created on a terracotta plate kind of thing. This is one of his early work. He would also use many a time text in his painting. He would love listening to music while painting. Not always, but many a times. And he loved like Kumar Gandharva, or Mallikarjun Mansoor, or various other artists also. And not too many abstract paintings he did. There was always people in his canvas. But here you see some abstract work also. And he would do collages. So during those practice which I was talking about, whether design, art, and ethnographic research, he also had another common factor besides me, my brother, and my mother, is Gandhi, which is always there in his way of living, his clothes, his eating habits, his talking about his work or approach to his work, which is very minimalistic, very simple, straightforward. So now I'm going to show some work about his part of his research. So Mulkraj Anand said that, Haku Shah, you have shared with some of us the phenomenon of survival of the crafts of the folk and the tribals. And you have gone into the interiors and rescued for the citizens of the machine civilization those objects of everyday art, which remind us that human creativity survives for the life processes at the same time when the machine civilization has made beyond its early object for use, the instrument for the death of mankind and the darkening of the earth forever. So these are some of the work which he and Fisher and he himself worked on, was on terracottas, which was mostly for offering. So they were votive terracottas. And there was one book which is called Votive Terracottas of Gujarat, which he did. and then other parts of the India also. Later on, I'll show you an exhibition which he created in Crafts Museum, which also traveled to US. So not many people had sort of, kind of dissected terracottas or any folk and tribal objects as a kind of mechanical or product. They didn't see it like that. But there was definitely a science. There was also a process involved in this. So he tried, using those methods of a design method, I would say, to try and understand the object. It's not just the beauty, outside beauty, but how it is being constructed, how it is made, how it can be documented. So like this is one series of photographs which he did about horse making. So how do you collect clay and the mixing it, preparing the clay. So this is a rider on the horse. I'm just showing few. I mean, he has thousands of photographs like this, which is, of course, he was not photographing for beauty of a photograph. Like normally, we used to see photograph as something which is a beautiful, like trying to imitate paintings. Then only one would like photograph. But he was using photography as a tool to for understanding the object or for documenting the object. Of course, he had his own eye, and he has a education of masters in fine arts. So that would definitely play here. But I am not going into that, and that all of you to see. And this was at the time where when photographic equipment was not easily available. There was no film rolls were not easily available. It was very dusty, and there were hardly any refrigerators around or cool ACs around to keep all these things dust free in Indian environment. So after making it, how the people would come and buy. So it's not just making, then it goes to this thing, and then after that the ritual happens. So here is the ritual, how it's being used. So many a time it stops at one level, like if a designer does something, they forget about what happens to the product they've designed afterwards. It's somebody else's job to see that. But this whole process he was interested in. So these are some of the photographs which I'm just showing. So he had shown as a photo exhibition also in 92 at IIC, in 94 it was at NCPA in the Photography as an Art Form, Centre for Photography as an Art Form in Bombay, and in 2006 in Alliance Francaise in Bangalore. So these were 3 photo exhibitions he did. His seminal work is also on block making. And there was a one particular print called Saudagiri print, which he spent many years researching and working on it. These prints were created to for Burma and Indonesia and Siam and that kind of places. So blocks were made near Ahmedabad in place called Pethapur, and the printers ordered this. He was very much interested in detail, like I suppose any creative person, artist, designer, filmmaker, whoever would be. And so he loved looking at things in detail. So he loved this loop which somebody had gifted him, and even small twig or a small bug or anything else. He would keep looking at it like this and show us, of course. This is another scholar, designer. Haku has worked a lifetime as an impassioned advocate, able to inspire, inform, produce, organize, motivate, patronize, promote, collect, and share. But it is his sharing that should be most firmly celebrated. Haku has been a friend of his craftsmen, the field, his colleagues, and of art. In his inspired vision is a source and stimulus for our own continued interest in art and the art of tribe and village. Through him, Kramrisch herself could take inspiration. To new generation in India, Haku offers a vision, a voice, a model material for study, a mind waiting to bend his civilization toward its ever-fertile roots. So during his lifetime, he also worked with 2, 3 individuals. One of them is the person you see in the photograph with the turban. His name was Ganesh, and it's a very interesting story, but I'm going to tell you in few lines that he is from a border state of Rajasthan, very near border. So he's Gujarat and Rajasthan border, and they had a drought in Rajasthan, so he was looking for work. There was nothing there, so he came to Ahmedabad, and somebody guided him to go to my father, who was running a tribal museum, which he had established. So he sang. He was a ballad singer, so he sang and all that, and then they collected in the office some money and gave it to him. But again he came. So my father said, every time you come and you make us listen to your music, we love it, but we can't keep paying you like this. But why don't you do one thing? You come in to my house and you draw something. So he said, but I have never drawn. I have never been to school also. So I've never held pen in my life. So my father said, it's okay. How much do you get right now? He says, I'm digging the road, side of the road, and I get 6 rupees. I'm talking about many years ago. So 6 rupee a day was his this thing, daily wage. And my father said, I will give you 7. You come. And he came, he drew for half a day, but he didn't enjoy. So he left. He says, I can't do it because I've never done it. So my father says, okay, anyway, here is your money for today. But anyway, few days later, he came again and then he started drawing. And my father said, why don't you draw what you sing? Whatever those words are, you just put it on the paper. And he became amazing painter, and he was shown all across the world. He, of course, won the President Award in India. And it was very interesting. And once I was making a small documentary with and interviewed KG Subramanian, and I was asking him that where is this imagery come from? Because he has never gone to school. He has never gone to a fine arts, of course, school. And so where is it? So he said it's some kind of, invisible order which is there in his mind, which of course he gathers from around him. But where this actual image comes from, nobody knows. So here again him, and they did a book together also for children. So Barbara Fisher's wife and my father. So it was in German Gujarati with his drawings. And he loved drawing like this. He would lie down and draw. And he would use mostly rapidograph, which was funny because I used to use and my brother used to use rapidograph, me for design and my brother for architecture. And he was given some other pen and he said, can I try this one? I said, but it's very expensive. That time, I think it was 95 or 100 rupee a rapidograph used to cost. And he started drawing and very, slowly, with a lot of patience, he kept drawing. And this kind of paper, which was A2 size or something, or A3 size, he would take, 3 months to draw. So these are some of his drawings. The second person my father worked with this Saroj, her husband lost job in textile mill. And so my father asked her to do some applique work because she was from a community of, shoemakers. In Gujarati, we call it Mochi community. And so my father thought that she might be good at, sewing and cutting and things like that. So here are her work. And her work was also shown across the world, in Australia, in Philadelphia. And even today, even IIM Ahmedabad Library has a huge piece by her, which is about 30 feet by 8 feet. The third person whom he worked with, and this was the first research project, in fact, in NID he started, was called on Matani Pachedi. And later on, this work went on, and in fact, recently, few years ago, again a book came out with Dr. Fisher and Jyotindra Jain. So this was like a temple. It's called temple cloth. So this particular community who use this is a very poor community, and they can't even afford a temple themselves. So this cloth becomes the temple for them, and the temple you can carry with you, in your basket or a bag. I'm not going into detail of the whole thing, but I'm just saying that how he worked with various people. And in fact, one of the son of one of these painter has revived the old technique, which is hand drawing. Because earlier what you saw was like this is a block, mostly block printing. And there are only black and red is used, which was the original colors, the alizarin. And but now there's a boy who just started drawing with the hand. Now I'm going to show you some collection while, he, on his research, he collected some of the things. He loved most of the things, but he didn't have enough money to buy it. But sometimes when he really loved something, he bought it. So these are textiles. And he would slowly, take photographs and document it and things like that. This is while he was trying to explain to me, I took this picture. This is a kind of attic, the half attic, which is an open attic, and he stored like this because we didn't have enough space in the house. And here some of the terracottas from the collection. There's some of the paintings. Some stone tiles. Some woodwork. I'm just showing you a few examples. There are lots. And when he came back from US in 68, 69, then he established this museum at the Gujarat Vidyapeeth, which was set up by Mahatma Gandhi in late 20s. This was an exhibition which he had curated and designed in, it was called, I think, Museum of, I forgot the name. It was in London.
Museum of Mankind.
Yeah, Museum of Mankind. Yeah. Thanks, Setu. So the actual things like a dioramas were created, and it was very interesting. It was very successful because there were so many Indians who those days couldn't even come back to India because they, and this was like old people or generation who would go there and see this and relive India, which they had seen before. This is the actual thing in the museum in London. This was a form in many forms of mother clay. This was an exhibition which he did in New Delhi and in San Diego. Later on, it went as a part of Festival of India. So there were about 200 craftsmen from potters came from all across India, and they stayed there in Crafts Museum and they built most of these things. What you see here, most of the things were actually created at the museum itself, in the village complex in Crafts Museum. Some things they brought it like small pots or terracottas or something like that, but a lot of things they created there. So let's say, for example, here, there are different chulas from across India, whether it's from Bihar or Orissa or Gujarat or Tamil Nadu or Kashmir. This was another exhibition called Rupa Ranga Rachana, and it was about different kind of crafts and art. Here is the Sonabai's work you see in the middle. This is a lady called Judy Fretter, who's a kind of craft revivalist and teacher, and who's written this. So this he created in 1989. Rajiv Gandhi had and his advisors had thought of creating 5 zones of India where they have different, because there was a lot of similarities between, let's say, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh in that around that area, or if you go in the east, and so 5 zones were created, and this was first in Udaipur. It was called part of West Zone Cultural Center. It was called Shilp Gram, and there were houses from Goa, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. And of course, there were museums. So this was Rajiv Gandhi had inaugurated this in 89. So actually, these were built by the people coming from that area. It was not that contract was given to some designer or PWD or somebody who came and did this. It was actually, they came there, stayed there and made. I mean, that's what my father's philosophy was, that try and involve them as much to create what we represent. Right now, you see Warli painting done by everybody, I mean, somebody sitting in Gurgaon is also doing Warli painting, and they don't even understand or never visited Warli or have no idea who Warlis are. Anyway, I don't want to get into it, but here you see Warli hut. So if any of you go to Udaipur, please go and see this complex, which is about, I think, some 30-40 acres or more probably. And there was not a single tree there. Now, like here you see hardly any trees. But if you go now, I might have, yeah. So there are lots of trees. This is amphitheater. There was international children's festival, children's film festival was organized. So that time this was created. Because there are workshops. The whole idea of Shilpgram was to have artists, designers, and filmmakers, architects who all come there and take and give each other. So these are all kothis from different parts of India. I mean, part of the western part of India. This is another thing he was involved with it's called National Museum of Man in Bhopal. It was built, the architect was Ram Sharma. And but it was, I think, hundreds of acres of land, including some of the prehistoric caves are part of this complex. So these are all done in 70s, 80s, 90s. And then I'm just coming back to some 3 of his work, which were theme-based work. And this was in 2002, there was a riots in Gujarat, and he was very upset about it, that why people sort of kill each other on the name of religion and things like that. So he loved Kabir's poem, because he, like I mentioned earlier, that he used to listen to Kumar Gandharv, and he loved this song called Haman Hai Ishq Mastana. And so he selected some of the poems with me and Shubha Mudgal, who's also a friend, who's a musician, and she composed and sang, and these works were created, and music CD came out by Sony Music, brought out a CD, and there's of course the catalog, which is this one, which has articles by various people. So this was by Rabia al-Basri. Rabia was one of the first Sufi poet from Basra, which is Iraq. This is by Kabir, Haman Hai Ishq Mastana. This is Palti Das. This is also Kabir. This is also Kabir. Again Kabir. And then after some years, another exhibition he curated, where he wrote to all his friends across, not all, some of his friends across the globe and in India. And he said, whatever quote or poem or something which inspired you, please send it to me. And then he selects some of those, and he created artworks. So this was in 2007. It was called Manush, where visuals and words meet. And you had from Rumi to Kabir to John Lennon to Gandhi. So this is Ashok Bajpai and Dr. Karan Singh, who were at the inauguration. So this is a poem here in Atso Oki. It's a Japanese poet. Or a Gye. Or Khalil Gibran. Kabir. Iqbal. तू शाहीन है, परवाज है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां भी है. Rabindranath Tagore. And there was another book came out as a dialogue not dialogue, it's his own, not an autobiography, but what his philosophy was and his way of life was. And it was released in IIC only. The author called Payush Daya, who stayed with him for 6 months, and every day he would talk to him for 2-3 hours, and then he will write it down, and then they would, so this book came out, and it's in Hindi, of course, because they wanted to be in an Indian language. You can see Jasleen on this end and the Piyush Daya on that end in for a front row. So some of these drawings were part of that exhibition also during this book. So these are some of his publications. This was about Pithora paintings in Gujarat, near Chota Udaipur area. This was published in Switzerland. This was about Matani Pachadi, which I mentioned. He also made 2 films. One was for Lalit Kala Academy in 78, on Pithora, the tribal god, and in 70, scraps made with Ivan Honeyman. She was from New York, but she made this about a recycled toy parrot made in Ahmedabad from the textile waste which textile mill produced. And then he created these workshops, and one was the hands. Then which he did in Ahmedabad, RISD, UC Davis in USA, and on sun in Chennai, river in Tamil Nadu. This was during his workshop, one of the workshops. This is the Jacob, who's probably still there in this. This was in UC Davis in USA. So he gave many lectures. I mean, this is just few who I've mentioned here, but you can see the various kinds of places and also issues or topics, I would say. These are some of the books which he wrote and sometime illustrated. Sometime he asked other people to illustrate, like some craftsperson or something like that, for children. So these are some of the children's books. All were written by him. The stories were written by him. These 2 publications were dedicated to him. The Invisible Order was tribute to Haku Shah. It's a kind of fresh script volume. It was edited by Eberhard Fischer, Dr. Eberhard Fischer, and which has, very interesting articles from or tributes from all across the world. And this was his kind of last show before his health deteriorated, and this was his last body of work, I would say. Of course, after this also he worked, but then his style completely changed because he had a motor coordination problem. So this was, and he called it Nitya Gandhi because it's like reliving Gandhi, but living Gandhi all the time. That's what his life was all about also. And he would almost every day, he would, clean our courtyard, our front of our house. And he would use this broom, which was like, I used to feel little shy about it. I would say, why are you using this broom? Because these were used by the people who come to clean. And we all know, I mean, they are considered untouchable. So I was feeling little shy that my father in the entire colony, he only uses this. And they were coming, and I wonder why he is doing it, because somebody else from municipal corporation or wherever is coming and cleaning it. But he would love cleaning. He would say, we should not, let him do little less. And for years, he's spun the cloth for himself, so thread, and he would get his clothes. Of course, not later on, but initially. So these are some of the paintings from the Nitya Gandhi exhibition. So this was shown first in Gandhi Ashram in Ahmedabad, and then it was shown in Bombay, and then it was shown in Bangalore, and last it was shown in Delhi. In Bangalore, it was Ramchandra Guha who had inaugurated the show at NGMA. And he passed away in 2019, and Kiran Nadar Museum thought of creating a sort of small retrospective, not like a full body of work, but some kind of trailer, I would say. This was in December 19, and it was called Isghat Antar Bagh Bagiche, which is again from a Kabir's poetry. Within this earthen vessel are pores and groves. So you would see, designer in him, how would, he would frame it, or what he would like the back, whether it's the beige or what color to be used. Like, I didn't go in detail because we have only 1 hour to talk about these things. But each project, he had this angle of designer as a researcher and as an artist, which kept sort of coming all together.
Yeah, actually, we remember seeing the exhibition at the Kiran Nadar Museum. It was very beautifully put together and gave a really nice insight into.
Yes, I'm just at the end of the presentation. This is last slide, and he loved this sentence, so I just wanted to use it. There are 2 words in my life. One is celebration of a moment, and the other is sharing of a moment.
Very lovely, very nice.
Thank you.
Now, it's very good that while you are showing these photographs, mentioning these names with Haku, a century of very important people who dedicated their life to art and creativity have gone.
Right.
And many of these things also I have the interest, which I could eat. And many people like Mani, K.G. Subramani have had, and many other people in Shantiniketan, and especially in Baroda,
Yeah.
Gujarat, because of Gandhiji, because of Sarabhais, because of NID, and School of Architecture, Doshi, and all these things, there was a cultural climate.
Correct.
And each one was interested in sharing, knowing. While you were talking about the craft museum, I remember we all did, before the craft museum, it was known as, क्या बोलते हैं उसको? In 72, we started, Haku, me, and no, the sculptor, no, who was in Baroda, who came to Delhi, no,
Shankar Chaudhary.
Shanku Chaudhary.
Shanko, yeah.
And there was a sculptor from Kashmir was there. We had a group called Rural India Complex.
Right.
Before the craft, it was Rural India Complex. As you mentioned, they built the houses, the actual people built.
Right.
So we got people from various parts of the country who came and built these thatch houses. So that is the beginning. And there are few houses are still left at the craft museum, but then they broke it. So that was wonderful. And then in the government, then there were people like Upul Jaikar and, Kamala Devi. Then on the other side, Sarabhai, the architect, the dancer, the musician, everybody was working in the Weaver Service Center, Handicraft Design Center,
Yeah.
It
was a fantastic time, fantastic.
I think it was a watershed moment also. It was post-independence. And I think the whole journey of Hakubai that you've captured for us, of this, of such landmark things that he was part of, or he was instrumental in, or he was in a journey where it was happening in the country. I think that is something quite exciting. I mean, I went to Nadi a decade and a half after you, Parthiv, and even there's so many vestiges that we grew up with, which we didn't know, like, which you brought out in the presentation today. Be the INR
horses
and the pataro and the chess and stuff like that. And I remember also from Eberhard Fischer hearing so much about him and actually meeting him. But that exhibition at Kiranada Museum was a big eye-opener, to that journey. Like you said, it was a glimpse. It was such a nice, exciting slice, of that. But to open it up also to people, if anyone has questions, anything, please feel free to ask. Just you can unmute yourself and ask. Unfortunately, we're a little out of time, but we can still take a good 4 or 5 questions. So please feel free to ask away. If anyone has anything. It's good you mentioned, because one of the Jacob, you ask, please.
Jacob.
Yeah, quick question, Parthiv. I remember once asking your dad whether he painted. I think it was also by that time he was quite. He was an older person, not very old, but he was still in his prime of painting. And I asked him, like, "Are you painting because it is necessary expression for you?" And he gave me an answer that completely stumped me. And to this day, I don't know whether I understood it right. So I'm asking the question. So I asked him, why do you paint? And he said that, these days I paint only when I need money, right? Because I'm so busy doing other things that I have no time for painting. But when I need some money, especially for doing the other things, and it was basically about working with tribals, organizing I remember the tribal festival, Gujarat Vidyapeeth. A lot of the money for doing that would come from his own pocket. And he said he paint actually to earn money to do these things. Now, I was wondering...
That must have been later, because earlier there was
later.
no money in the painting. You see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was later. And I was actually quite... I just wanted to ask you if this was true or not.
I don't know. I have no idea about that. But normally, in fact, he had an issue with the money and the painting. He would all the time, gallery would ask to increase, his price for his paintings, and he would always say no. But and he would also very hesitate to talk about money about his painting. So if you come to buy, he would rather you go through a gallery. But sometimes some people come home and say, and he was always, and he never bargained. Also, he said, "This is not a vegetable market." When you go to a post office, do you say that the 50 paisa stamp I want it for 40 paisa? You never say that. So he says, why do you want my painting to be? Anyway, I'm charging less. So anyway, he was one of those few people who, at that time, there were many like that. But now, of course, things have changed completely, and it works in very different ways. But he would not talk much about money. I think that the Gandhian thing was also there, that money was sort of bad, which is completely opposite of how Gujarati would think. Even in our sayings, we have a lot of money-oriented sayings, the proverbs or whatever you want to call it. It's like, if something happens, I'll say, Mare kitla taka. Means, how many percentage do I have? In the sense, I don't have anything to do with it. What am I going to get out of it? That's the whole meaning. But there's a percentage, you are saying. I mean, if I translate this, it doesn't work. That what percentage do I get? If there's something happening, if there is an accident happen, and if somebody says, "Oh, let's go and do something," you say, "Oh, but what have I got to do with it?" That kind of thing. So he was completely opposite of the typical Gujarati way of dealing with things as far as money was concerned.
Yeah, thanks.
People all over the country, whether Sukhdev, Chari, Pratap Sharma, Jagmohan, Dashrath Patel, Pupul Ben, all this, everybody was more engrossed in their work. They were not money oriented. Not only Haku, of course, was Gandhian, but a lot of people were much more dedicated themselves to work. And there's a
and also because he had he had exposure to US, abroad, and also to Delhi. He would come in various committees, and many a time there was a opportunity where Popul Ben or somebody told that, why don't you come here, become a director of this museum or do this, and he said, no, I want to stay in Ahmedabad, because if you go to a bigger place, you get more opportunities, you get more exposure. But he was happy being in Ahmedabad.
Good, thank you very much.
There's a question by a lady called Meera. Would you like to ask the question yourself?
And there is another one from Salil Tripathi also, who is from US. Yeah.
Sure. Meera.
Yeah, I just want to know if we can, Parthibai, if we can get stories which you mentioned.
Which stories? Sorry?
The children's stories.
Yeah, it's published by different people. So there is one published by Sehmat, there are other is by IGNCA. So some, and then there is two by one Rajasthani.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just write to me and I'll.
I'll call you. Okay, thank you.
Salil Tripathi, would you like to also ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, fascinating, absolutely. And thank you, Parthiv, for such a
lovely to see you here.
It's early morning here, but I can see even Setu up early. Setu would be early, but so am I.
He's in New York, and you are also in New York, I think.
New York, But I think he's Manhattan and Brooklyn or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a river between us. No, but my question was more to do with rights, because I've done some work around copyright of Aboriginal art through pen.
Right.
And, you're quite rightly very concerned about, and because I was struck by the example you gave, the hypothetical or actual example of someone in Gurgaon painting Warli without knowing who Warlis are. Yeah. And I was just wondering, where is the situation with that? What did your father think about it? Because, of course, this is a collective property, I mean, it is
Yeah.
collect civilizational gift, this
Right.
kind of art. But I'm curious about what kind of rights consciousness exists, because of course, this is cultural appropriation in a way.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I know that your father would have objected to that kind of appropriation. So I'm just
Definitely he
curious
did.
about
He
your
had,
thoughts.
yeah. No, there were 2-3 things he was worried about. And again, one needs to see it in that time and that perspective, because things have changed over the time. Because right now, when you revive this whole craft revival is a big thing in India. And of course, there is definitely a question that the craftsmen, when they change things themselves, it's fine. But when intervention happens by, let's say, designers or people who sell, salesmen or a vendor or a shop people, then what is, like, you will see Warli painting or a Madhubani painting in the lift. When you go in an elevator, there are these formicas, like those sheets. What are they called in the what you put it on a table or the doors, those formica sheets.
Yeah,
So it's print,
laminates.
laminates is the word. Those are now with the Warli and Madhubani copies, not even original. So the problem is that where is it going and who will control it? And I would love to know what the pen is doing about it, because he was always wondering that. Also respecting, you see, some tribal or folk form has a certain meaning behind it. So let's say Matani Pachedi. Now it's like a temple, right? If you print that on a cushion where you are going to sit, or you are going to you are not doing. There is a problem there, because it is meant for something else. Now, if you probably take out some blocks which is just flowers or a sun or a moon or something like that, and that you print it on a cushion cover or a pillow cover, then it's fine. Or even a toilet seat. But like I've seen, thing like that where anything is printed on anything. In music, that happens all the time. Like a lot of Bollywood movies borrow things from, like Nimuda Nimuda song, for example, is a Rajasthani folk song which belongs to a particular community. But now the right belongs to probably T Series, and the composer is probably whoever, ABC, I don't want to even name it, which is 500 years old, or 200 years old probably, which belongs to, like you said, rightly said, that it belongs to that community. And how can you just, because I publish it first, it becomes mine? That's stupid.
Yeah.
So anyway, there are many layers to this argument, which, and needs to be talked about.
No, I'll connect you with Zoe Rodriguez. She's a copyright lawyer and the head of the PEN Women Writers Committee. She's in Sydney, and she has led the work on Aboriginal art. So I think she would very much want to get involved. And there's a copyright manifesto that PEN has created, where community art rests with community and not by people who appropriate it. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's great.
And there's that famous quote, right? God as an ashtray. I can't remember who said it, but that came to my mind, when you talked about it. I think this was during the first Festival of India, when Rajiv Sikhi was putting together Aditi. I think somebody had said that, God should not be treated as an ashtray.
True. That's what. No, that when the designer, without sensitivity, intervenes and doesn't even realize what it is. Just like I said, Warli painting, people don't know what is it. They've never seen it. And suddenly they just use it for anything just because it sells. And there are lots of people love it, saying, oh, but now the craftsman is getting money, or whatever is getting money. The crafts is getting known, etc., etc. So there are various angles to it.
Thank you, Parthiv, a lot for this presentation. And I hope that all of you will also spread the word. And those who have not been able to attend this, if they're interested, they'll be able to access this on YouTube and be able to also attend some of the previous talks, especially with, the passing away of Jasleen Thamija last week. And she had such an important, I think, association with Parthiv, Haku Bhai also during their youth. With her being in Gujarat for a few years and working on crafts. But I hope that all of you will attend our Meet the Artist lectures that happen on second Saturday of every month. And thank you once again, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Parthiv.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Jatin Bhai.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.